Do you bleed green? Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen.
Here we go!
Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50 plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate.
We love to argue.
You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go! Let's go! Go!
And a good morning, Birds fans. It's a non-football Friday. The question is, will it be a fatality Friday? We'll find out at some point in the future. I don't even know if we'll find out today and or tomorrow. There are many variables as to where this Philadelphia Eagles offseason is going, and that's why I'm partnered with John McMullen, because he gets to the heart of it and gets us some good insight. Johnny Mack, when we left yesterday, I asked what your day was going to be like on Thursday, and you said texting my life away, looking for a sunny day and some inside information.
And San Martin. Yeah, we're talking about that. Yeah, looking for a sunny day, but couldn't get one because, the owner's busy yacht shopping. So we'll get the business when it's time to get the business.
It is a good life that Jeff Lurie is having, except for Monday night down in Tampa. That wasn't too good, but he's trying to rebound by buying a yacht. Good on him. And here in the Delaware Valley, the snow's coming down. I went with the heavy shirt today, just I know it's snowing significantly outside, and it's going to get worse as the day goes on. So that, and I wore the shirt last night, so I'm throwing it back on again. I know people want a result. They want someone to pay. They want to see a little carnage after the collapse that was the 2023 season for the Philadelphia Eagles. As a guy who does this for a living and also a fan, I'd like some answers too, but maybe I'm just a little bit more patient in life and don't need my answers immediately every single day, every single time. You got any problems with the Eagles taking the measured approach here? We can poke fun at Jeff Lurie all we want about yacht shopping, but there are other teams that are making other calls and trying to sell other coaches, be they head or coordinator or any other position. The National Football League continues to spin, and the Eagles have taken a step back and said, let's take a deep breath before we get into the most important meetings and the decisions thereafter. Eagles a little slow to react here, in your opinion, Johnny Mack?
No, because I think their reaction at this stage is pretty obvious, and that's that Nick Sirianni's going to be back, most likely. I won't put it at 100% because there's an avenue, but I've always said the avenue lies with Nick Sirianni's willingness to accept the instructions put in front of him. If he accepts them, he'll be back, and I'm at 100% with that. But he might not, and that's where the opening comes in. So from the Eagles' perspective, it's business as usual. They're doing things behind the scenes. Jeffrey's yacht shopping, but as you saw the report from Diana Rossini, Howie Roseman, and Nick Sirianni are contacting potential coaches, be they coordinators or assistants. So they're still doing work, and that is another indication that they're going in a certain direction. And again, they can sit down today, and who knows? It's snowing, so everything's canceled, right? It's not like when we were young, Jody. Yeah, this wouldn't get school canceled, but they canceled school last night, so Jeffrey might put it off even further. We'll see what shakes out today, but I think it's pretty clear the plan, and we'll see how the plan unfolds. So from that standpoint, I don't have a problem with it. And if you go back to Chip Kelly, right, when he wants to fire somebody, for those who forget, he fired Chip Kelly. Chip didn't coach the last game of the season. He was out. Pat Shermer coached the last game of the season. So, he can make a quick decision when he wants to make a quick decision. But then you go to Doug Peterson again. The plan was, and that's why we leave the door open for Nick Sirianni. The plan was to move forward with Doug Peterson. And then Doug laid out his plan to move forward. Jeffrey didn't like it, said, no, you got to go in a different direction. Doug, who basically got a little bit tired of being pushed around, said, you know what? I'm done. Pay me the final year of my deal. I'll go take a vacation, much like the owner. And he did, and he came back the year later. So that is where we are. And that's, I think, pretty clear from this standpoint. But if he wanted to fire him, he could have fired him the next day, could have fired him 2 hours after the game. He could have done it immediately, but he didn't want to do it immediately. So that tells you a lot.
Sure does. And, oh, by the way, Pat Shermer, want to know, best winning percentage
yes,
ever.
Eagles history. Yeah, correct.
It's still kind of surprising.
Will never be broken, by the way. Will never be broken.
Only be tied, correct.
Yeah.
And there is no interim coach here because Nick Sirianni made to the end, got his head handed to him in Tampa Bay. I'm with you across the board and everything you just said. You and I see it exactly the same. So here's my question to you. You probably would have said we weren't doing Birds 365 at the time. I wish we were. That Doug Peterson would have said, been able to read the room and go, do I really want to stay as a coach of this team? Do I want to get fired? Do I want to take another shot with my guys again the year? Because you continually tell me, Jody, there's a reason I went 4-11-1 that year. They weren't good, but they weren't as bad as their record indicated because they had all those injuries on the offensive line. And they weren't the same team that had gone to the playoffs consecutive years prior to and even won the Super Bowl. Doug had to know that too. And he had to have faith that, hey, if I get the chance, I'm going to be able to put this back together again. He chose not to. And I think Doug's also bright enough to know if you draw a line in the sand, the owner's going to erase the line and you, my friend. And apparently Doug reached the conclusion that, yeah, I want to move on. Go ahead, fire me, like you just said. I don't know that I would have believed that prior to. If we were doing Birds 365, then you and I both would have been on the record. I was on WIP at the time, and I think, memory serves, I thought that Peterson, when he wasn't fired the day after the season ended, had saved his job. And then they had the all-important meeting, and Doug decided to throw a smoke bomb into the room, and boom, he was done. Mm-hmm. Do you think that Nick Sirianni can do the same today?
I think he could, but the difference between Doug and Nick is Doug was farther along getting pushed around. He had wanted to keep Mike Rowe the year prior. And you remember we're there in the press conference. We asked him the question, is Mike Rowe going to be back? He said yes.
Yep.
And then 2 days later, he had to turn around and fire him because he didn't want to fire him. He was ordered to fire him. So he was further along the process of being a little bit upset about how they were dipping into his coaching staff. And then it came the next season. And from the standpoint, Press Taylor's an interesting guy because Doug didn't hire Press Taylor, but he grew to like him. And Press is interesting to me because behind the scenes, the Eagles will tell me, what a smart guy. This guy's going to be a future star in the coaching industry. And all of a sudden, he became the scapegoat and he was a dummy. So overnight, very similar to Nick Sirianni.
That's an actual scapegoat. You and I
Yeah.
debated the definition of scapegoat
Yeah.
yesterday. Oh, yeah. I would absolutely point to Press Taylor and his Philadelphia Eagle tenure and go, oh, that guy got scapegoated.
Yeah. And, same in a larger sense, because not a lot of people knew Press because, he was never officially the offensive coordinator. You remember the last year they had that weird convoluted setup where they didn't have an offensive coordinator. They had Press Taylor and Rick
three semi-offensive coordinators.
Yeah, Marty was here. It was absurd. And Doug kind of said that. Look at your nonsense, basically. I've talked to people close to Doug since then. That was their, creation. Doug didn't want to do that, and it didn't work. So from that standpoint, then he goes in with the clear pen. Look, and Jim Schwartz, the smartest guy of them all, was like, I'm going to retire for 20 minutes and get the hell out of here before the, what hits the fan. And that's how long he retired, I think, 20 minutes.
Yeah,
and he was back in the league. So Jim was the smartest guy of all. But so he had to replace, or he had to have a plan for both coordinators. And he said, Press is my guy. He grew to like Press a lot. And obviously he's got him in Jacksonville and he's the offensive coordinator. And he wanted to hire Matt Burke, who was a Jim Schwartz guy, Jim Schwartz acolyte who was here, and former defensive coordinator in Miami, smart guy, Ivy League guy. And if it wasn't Matt Burke, it was going to be Corey Unlin, who was here for many years under Doug as the defensive backs coach, but was actually, again, Chip Kelly brought him in. And he had left, and he was going to try to bring him back. So Jeffrey said, no, can't do that. And, further along from the grow aspect of it, he was more upset than probably Nick will be today when he said, and by the way, I think Nick understands there's got to be a lot of changes on that defensive coaching staff, especially. I think he understands that going in. So it was a little bit different from that perspective with Doug and Nick, and all because of Mike Rowe and to a certain extent, Press Taylor.
I think you've laid it out quite well, and there are significant differences between Peterson's situation and Sirianni's situation. Here's the one reason that I think Doug may blow up Nick may blow up himself. I'm a Sirianni fan. I've never gotten to the point where I said leaning up, adding that percentage. It was less than 5% before the Seattle game. Then it went to Tampa. Then it went to 20%. And the Giants and now I got to 51-49 stay. I never even got to 50-50. I've been a he should stay guy all along. Readily admitting, if he gets fired, I'm not going, oh my God, what were the Eagles thinking? No, they could really fire him, but it was damn close to 50-50. So I've stayed as a Sirianni fan. But one of the things I've always kind of questioned Nick on and stand by today is he can be a stubborn SOB. He can dig his heels in when he wants to. And he doesn't get quite to the level of obstinate, but he's close. He's bumping up against it. He can get his, in an uproar every once in a while. I don't know that would happen today. I would bet against it happening today. As we sit here, can I tell you, I guarantee you it doesn't happen today? No, I can't.
That's where I am. Yeah. I mean, he can. And I said, if they try to push and try to go in a different direction, I always use, and I don't think they're going to do this, but I always use Kevin Patullo as an example. Say, you know what? You guys are too close and you need somebody who's going to not just agree with you, things like that. You know how corporations are. They said you got to bring in differing thoughts and outside voices and things like that. Because they're so close, if they try to go down that route and say something like that, which I don't think they're going to do, I want to emphasize that clearly. I could see Nick saying, you know what? I'm getting another job. You pay me for a year, even if it's not immediate. He's getting another job those people are insane who think Nick Sirianni wouldn't be hired by somebody else. So yeah, that's why you have to leave the door open. If they push too far, and really I shouldn't even say they, it's really Jeffrey more than Howie. If he pushes too far, yeah, anything's on the table. And that's why you can't say 100% he's going to be back.
Right. Let me ask you about a specific course of action that the coach has taken during his time here in Philadelphia, which I just personally have questioned here with you on Bird 365 on my WIP shows. I don't get the whole rubbing salt in the wounds on opponents thing.
Yeah.
The going in the stands and high-fiving fans and screaming in tunnels and stuff like that. Maybe you know the answer to this. If you do, please share it, because I don't. Do you think he was ever attempted to be reeled back in by the organization?
No, never got that indication.
Okay.
Never, because I've asked him that question. And I'm not the only one. I said, he talks about motivation all the time. Use whatever you use. Make stuff up. He said, Michael, he always points to Michael Jordan, and Michael did. He would make stuff up. DK Metcalf made stuff up. When he was playing, Jim Schwartz went up to him and said, man, you're a great player. You're the best. You're not there yet, but you're the closest I've ever seen to Calvin Johnson, which is a compliment for anybody who knows anything about professional football. Well, DK was like, what do you mean I'm not as good as somebody else? And he took it as an affront, and he went out and he torched the Eagles. Use it. And I asked Nick that exact question, and I turned his own thoughts on him, and I said, you ever think about other people using that as motivation when you spike the football and make those? Because Kansas City was, when I asked him, and he came in and was hollering about the Kansas City fans, and he mentioned he saw Elliot Shore Parks, your comrade at WIP, who said the Chiefs were going to win the game because they had the better coach and the better quarterback. And he was screaming about him and that. And it's like, come on, dude, what are you doing? I've asked him that question. He says, you got to be yourself and all that kind of stuff. And evidently he was a big trash talker. And way back to high school when he was playing basketball, his friends say he would trash talk and everybody loved him and the opposing schools hated him because he just, and that's fine. But when things went bad, people will pile on more quickly.
Oh, yeah.
I was at Joe Torre was the guy who I first heard it from. And he said, if you're nice to people, if you're engaging to people, simple things like you introduce yourself and say, hi, Jody, I'm John. Hi, Ed Kratz in the green room. I'm John. They will give you the benefit of the doubt. Now, if you do badly and you treat people poorly, they're going to turn on you quicker. And if you're a head coach, or in that case, a manager in baseball, that's very important to get a little bit more room. And Nick doesn't seem to process that at this point. But he has acknowledged pretty consistently down the stretch of the season he needs to work on controlling his emotions a little bit more.
Right. And that was kind of leading to my stubbornness point. If he had been told, I guess the only one he really have to listen to is Howie. I don't think Jeffrey would call him in and wag a finger at him and don't be high-fiving other teeth. So Howie probably, if the organization felt that he had gone way overboard and it could potentially abstract a price down the road, I never saw the pullback, which is the reason why I've said that Nick's Sirianni is stubborn. I'll give you one other incident. Shockingly, I don't think I've ever mentioned this on the show before, the fact that he never defers, always defers, never even thinks about it. Just go ahead. The analytics say, that's just stubborn. You have to take into consideration each and every single game. His stubbornness there just grates at me. You know that. And maybe, just maybe, he loses his mind today and goes real stubborn on him. And says, no, my coaching staff would. The one thing we don't know is how much the whole Matt Patricia thing came down, whether it was him, and he does that. He's not stubborn, he's stupid. But we don't know how much.
Maybe he'll say he can't shovel out here in South Jersey. Can't get over.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that'll be John McMullen and Ed Kratz and all the other Eagle beat writers texting their life away to find out where Nick Sirianni is stuck and offer him a ride in their fancy four-wheel drives on their huge Eagle reporter fans salaries to get Nick over to the Wells Fargo. No, I don't think so. That's not going to be happening. I would not be surprised if Nick is already there. Just made sure, got over there.
You got to be there early. You got to pretend. That's Dick Vermeil's fault, by the way. You got to be there at 5 a.m. You got to be there, all day.
Nick probably working on his fourth cup of coffee. All right, he's McMullen. I'm McDonald. We are Mac on Birds 365. One of our faves. He's got the good heavy shirt on today, like Jody Mack. He's prepared for the winter. Ed Kratz joins us next here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Mac here on Birds 365 on a non-football Friday. Will it turn into a fatality Friday? We are joined by our buddy from Sports Illustrated, John's running mate, Ed Kratz. And little did we know that Ed Kratz had the best sources in the yachting world. I just did not know that that was the case. So since you were the first to note that Jeff was cooling down and out looking at potentially luxury ships, we are going to allow you to officially tell us Is it St. Martin or St. Martin?
I think I'm going to go with St. Martin. You know, it's
straight up, just regular Martin. Not
just
Martin.
straight up St. Martin.
Yeah. What ugly Americans we are. I want to go San Martin. I don't know why, but I want to try it. It sounds better than St. Martin.
Sounds more refined, but I don't know if it's actually right.
Yeah. It's not about right. It's about being more refined. I digress. I'm sorry, Ed. Yeah.
Well,
by the way, did we know he was officially shopping for yachts, or was he just on vacation? Just wanted to, because it was nice. It was 83 in Fort Lauderdale. I had to stop there. So I checked the weather in St. Martin, and it was 84, 85, same type of thing. So was it just he wanted to get away after that disgusting performance in Tampa Bay by his football team?
Well, my source told me he was shopping for a boat. And I'm sure it's not a dinghy, given Jeffrey Lurie's net worth.
That's pretty good.
I'm thinking it was a yacht of some kind, or a pretty big boat, I would say.
How does that lie with you that he's going out yacht shopping?
Well, maybe he's one of those people that, to feel better about something that just happened, like the Eagles season ending, he goes out and shops and spends money and feels feels better about things. Maybe it's as simple as that. Maybe he said, you know what, I'm so depressed that this season is over. I'm going to go out and buy a bigger boat. I'm going to buy a better boat, or just buy a boat in general, just so I feel better. That's kind of how I take it. I don't, it's interesting. Maybe it cleared his head. Maybe he's trying to get some clarity.
Hey, you know what? That part of it, I think you should clear your head. I think you shouldn't be emotional. I think you should take a couple days. So that part of it, I think, is a good aspect of just, hey, settle down, be logical, rational. Don't be emotional. But I think it tells you something too, because Jody just pointed out correctly so. Everybody else is interviewing candidates, interviewing not only head coaching candidates, but coordinators and things like that. And if you're behind, that's what happened with Sean Desai. Let's be honest. The Eagles were last in line, and they got a guy they weren't happy with. So there's an interesting tightrope there.
I can tell you why Jeff Lurie is yacht shopping. Because he can, okay? That's why he's doing it, because he can. McMullen can, Krause can't, McDonald can, Jeff Lurie can. So he's going to do that.
I could go dinghy shopping if you guys want to go dinghy shopping.
As a matter of fact, I think that we've seen dinghy used here on our stream by several Eagle fans describing the head coach of the Eagles. I think they've referred to him as a dinghy. So what's going to happen here, Ed Krause? Big meeting, powwow today is Nick Sirianni, if he has to sell himself and his future vision of the future, if he has to accept any suggestions / mandates that he gets from Lurie and Roseman, how's it going to play today? Do you think, John and I have spent the better part of the last 10 minutes talking about how the coach could shoot himself in the foot. You think that's got a chance of happening today?
Well, I heard you guys talking a little bit about the stubbornness of Nick Sirianni, and listen, if he goes in there and, sticks to his guns, so to speak, and, says, I still want to do this my way, and I feel like I've earned that right, then yeah, he could be in trouble. But I don't think that that's going to happen. I think Lurie probably went away knowing that, Nick Sirianni is going to be his head coach. And maybe he told Howie and, hey, put together a coordinators list and, run it by Nick. And then when I get back, we'll go through it after I meet with Nick. And that's what we'll talk about during the meeting, is we'll figure out what we're going to do with this coaching staff. But I think Lurie being away kind of indicates to me that Nick's probably safe. And I think he'll still have the job after today's meeting. Now, how the coordinator thing shakes out, that's a whole different story. And the rest of the staff shakes out. We already know they need a defensive coordinator. The whole offensive coordinator thing is interesting because, Jalen Hurts and Brian Johnson, their families are close. Jalen really likes Brian. In fact, when Jalen met with us, when all the lights were dimmed inside the locker room Tuesday evening or Wednesday evening, I guess it was, I'm losing track of my days. Hurts mentioned that he has trust in Nick. And he said, Nick and Brian and me, we're going to get this thing fixed. So he even alluded to Brian Johnson. And you could make the case that, listen, Jalen Hurts had 8 different offensive coordinators before Shane Steichen stayed here for 2 years. And then we saw that big growth jump in Hurts in year 2 of Shane Steichen. So that could be the pitch is, hey, this would be year 2 of Brian Johnson. There's familiarity now. Let's bring back Brian Johnson and now to see what we can do with Jalen Hurts in year 2. Maybe he makes a similar jump in year 2 under Johnson that he did in year 2 under Steichen.
Yeah, Brian's so interesting. He's the most interesting part to me because I think Nick is going to be back, and obviously they're going to go in a different direction on the defensive side, and that leaves Brian Johnson. And he is so close to the quarterback. After the game, after an extensive cooling off period, I think you were there, Ed, when we walked in at the top. And what did we see first? Jalen Hurts and Brian Johnson sitting together in a deep conversation after a terrible loss. They're close. And how much do you want to mess with the quarterback? And by the way, the rest of the league, he interviewed with Atlanta. Today, he's going to interview in Tennessee, Carolina. They like Brian Johnson. He seems to be well respected. Now, I don't think he's getting a head coaching job. You never know. I look at Carolina and I say, not a well respected organization. They're not going to get plan A. They're probably not going to get plan B. They might even not get plan C. So they might end up on a surprise. And that's the one avenue I could see Brian getting a head coaching job. But I don't think it's likely. And if he doesn't, and you fire a guy who's getting all these interviews to be a head coach, boy, that's rare. I'm trying to think of, do you ever remember that happening? Somebody getting that many head coaching interviews and then he gets fired as an offensive coordinator?
You hate to say it, but, he fits the criteria for the Rooney Rule, right? I mean, you have to take that into consideration. Is he just kind of the guy? And it's great for Brian Johnson to get, practice with these interviews to become a head coach, because that's probably going to be in his future. But you have to wonder how many of these teams are just, qualifying for the Rooney Rule by interviewing Brian Johnson. I hate to say that because I like Brian a whole lot too, and I think he's a smart guy, and I think he could be back, to be honest. And we saw that with Shane Steichen in his first year with Jalen Hurts. I think he had a job interview for a head coach too. He didn't get it, but it was good practice for him, and he came back year 2. We saw the jump in Hurts, and that led to the job with the Indianapolis Colts. But, John, you mentioned the fact that, the Panthers aren't a well-respected organization. That's something else Lurie has to think about here is you don't want to go down the path of having to hire your 4th head coach here in the last 11 years since Andy Reid left. That's not a good look. It wasn't that good of a look when he fired Doug Peterson 3 years after he won the Super Bowl. And how would it look if he let go of a head coach? And I know there were issues that need to be fixed, no doubt about it. And fans want Nick Sirianni gone, but it wouldn't be a good look, in my opinion, if you release a coach who has taken his team to the playoffs all 3 years that he's been here, put together back-to-back 11-plus winning seasons, something only Andy Reid and Dick Vermeil have done in the history of this franchise, and took him to a Super Bowl just a year ago. I just don't think it's a good look. I think he comes back.
Let me ask you this, Ed, because I thought about this from the coordinator perspective. There's a chance they're going to fire both. We know they're going to hire their 3rd defensive coordinator in less than 12 months. That's a given. And the question is Johnson, yay or nay? And if I got to be the Johnson hater, that's fine. You guys both seem to think he's going to stay. I don't think he should. That's just my opinion. I think they should change both coordinators. However, to your point, you want to be hiring the guy who saw both 3, not 1, not 2, 3 coordinators get fired in 1 year's time. That the Eagles went 11-5. Yeah, they collapsed. Yeah, they got beat by Tampa in the first round, but they went 11-5 and fired not 1, not 2, but 3 coordinators in 1 year does that make the job a little dicey for anybody's out there who's going, well, wait a minute, do I really want to go there? They'll lop off my head if we come back 8-9 next year. I don't want to necessarily take that gig. Should you worry about that and how you handle the coordinators?
Well, yeah, there's a case to be made for that also. And, listen, I had a hard time getting back from Tampa on Tuesday, I guess it was. I spent the whole day in the Tampa airport with flight delays, and there were other beat writers in that airport stranded with me.
By the way, not a bad airport. I've flown in and out of Tampa plenty of my nice place.
Nice.
They got the outside smoking. You stand in a cage. You have a cigarette. You go back in. I like the Tampa airport a lot.
Yeah, well, I'm not a smoker, but I like my menu
learn a lot
options.
outside in the cage.
Yeah.
Was Jim Leland out there in the cage?
If the Tigers were flying out, yes, Jim would have been out there with me.
Yeah. Well, I like that airport too. I think it's probably one of the, I've flown through a lot of
I called it top 5, Tampa.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. But anyway, my point being is, Sal Powell from ESPN was there, and him and I were having a conversation about, if you bring Sirianni back, how difficult is it going to be to find a young coordinator to come in and hitch his wagon to Nick Sirianni, who, if he does come back, will probably be on the hot seat as soon as next season begins. And if he gets off to a slow start, he may not see Halloween. So do you want, if you're a coordinator, a young coordinator with eyes towards becoming a head coach, would you take this job, knowing that Sirianni could be gone if he gets off to a slow start next year? I mean, I don't think so. So now you're looking at more of an experienced voice inside those coordinator rooms, maybe like a Frank Reich, who there is some interest there on the Eagles side of bringing Frank Reich in to possibly be either an offensive coordinator if Johnson's gone, or he could be a senior offensive analyst to work with Brian Johnson.
Marcus Brady's job, who's probably he got an interview with Chicago to be the offensive coordinator. So, yeah, a lot of avenues you can go.
Yeah, for sure. But then a defensive side, are you going to get a young guy, a young linebacker coach or a secondary coach who is going to come in and hitch his star to Nick Sirianni's fate? It's going to be tough. So you might be looking at a veteran voice there, maybe a Mike Caldwell that just got fired from the Jaguars or somebody like that. So, and maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's what Sirianni needs, is more of a veteran presence in those chairs.
Yeah. One of the things you brought up, Ed, and I think it's a good point, and I think people get confused by it, or they forget because of the success the Eagles have had. Adam Gase walked out of that building. Ben McAdoo turned around on the New Jersey Turnpike, turned down the Philadelphia Eagles. Brandon Staley wouldn't interview with the Philadelphia Eagles, said, nope, I'm not dealing with Howie. Brandon Staley turned down the Philadelphia Eagles. Robert Saleh, because he's a nice person by all accounts. I don't think he's done a good job for Jody's Jets, but good guy. He took an interview with the Eagles, but just to be nice. He was far along with the Jets. Same thing with Arthur Smith. They all said, you know what? This ain't a good spot. You just fired Doug Peterson, a Super Bowl winning head coach, 3 years off. So you fire Nick Sirianni? Yeah, somebody's going to take the job because there's only 32 of these things. Carolina's going to be able to hire somebody too. But guys who have options are not going to look at you. They're not. And those tend to be, in those cases, people say, well, they all stink. Staley stinks. That's true. But you generally want guys with options. And if the Eagles keep going down this route, it's not going to be good.
Well, that's exactly right. And, so that's why Lurie has to be careful about this. And you want to make sure you get the right guy, obviously, but what's that right guy going to look like as a coordinator? Again, I just think that, sometimes the grass isn't always greener. And I think Brian Johnson, I would probably give him another shot. Now, Sirianni has to come in with a plan with this meeting with Jeffrey Lurie, because there was obviously some sort of disconnect. And I think it was between Sirianni and Johnson, on how they wanted this offense to look. So that could be what plays against, Johnson returning and maybe even Sirianni returning, but I don't think so. But there was a disconnect between those two Nick wanted things done a certain way. Brian Johnson, I think, resisted, and I think that trickled down to Jalen, and we saw, some struggles from Jalen. So Sirianni has to go to Lurie with a plan to say, yeah, I'm on board with this now. I'm going to give Brian complete autonomy to run what kind of offense he wants, and I'm just going to kind of be in charge of things. And I don't know if
that's not happening.
I don't think he'll be able to do it.
You were listening to me and John before.
Yes.
One thing you can definitely say about Nick Sirianni, he can be stubborn.
Oh, yeah. And, he's got to.
So here's how you got to pose it. Would the Eagles try and foist that on Sirianni? Listen, we want to keep Brian Johnson, so you need to, cut the restraints. Make it his offense. No, you always said, oh, yeah, what's my offense? Don't get it by that's my. You took the bullets. But we know better behind closed doors. Yeah, you were still pulling all the strings. And we don't think the offense ran as well as it should have. Give Brian autonomy. Do you think the Eagles would actually run that by Sirianni?
Well, I think there's a history there, right? I mean, they tried to foist their beliefs onto Doug Peterson and who he should bring back and how this team should be run from, inside the coaches' rooms. And Doug pushed back on that, and he lost his job basically because of that. So yeah, I could certainly see, based on history, Jeffrey Lurie and how he's saying, yeah, this is how it has to be, and if you don't agree with that, then we're probably going to have an issue here that could lead to you being fired. I mean, it's that simple, and we'll see if Sirianni goes along with it. I think he likes being here. He likes being in charge of the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think he would maybe put his stubbornness on the back burner and go along with whatever they want.
Two things. I love the use of the word foist by both of you. So well done. I love that.
That was Jody. And I just followed up on Jody.
Yeah, I love it. Number two, if that's what you think, and I know people are going to roll their eyes, but if that's what you think, and Brian Johnson has a better plan for this offense, fire the damn head coach, hire Brian Johnson to be the head coach, put coordinators on him, because you're not – one thing we know, they're not firing the quarterback. So you're trying to accentuate the strengths of the quarterback as much as possible and trying to get him back on the right path. If that's truly what you think, that's what you should do. Not try to force, hey, Nick, go sit here while Brian runs the offense and Jesse Minner or anybody else they hire runs the defense, and you just defer on kickoffs. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's going to work.
That's interesting. That would certainly, as a journalist, I always root for the story, and that would be an amazing story if they had.
Let me give both you guys a story, because I can see that I see this very differently than you two guys. I think Brian Johnson stunk this year, between you and I. I think he did a lousy job. I don't know the inner workings behind. Was Nick basically dictating terms? He made it sound like he gave Brian a lot of latitude, and Brian was calling the plays. It's my offense. We draw it up all week, but then on Sunday, I have trust in Brian. I let him call the plays. I think their play calling was brutal this year. For the amount of talent that they had, the best offensive line in football, 2 number 1 wide receivers, a top 7 or 8 tight end, and the offense played the way that it did, specifically the last 7 weeks of the season. What the F? So I think Brian Johnson did a lousy job. And John has continued to suggest, well, you don't want to upset the quarterback. He's his guy, and you don't want to, you're committed to Jalen, which I agree with. Of course, you are $250 million.
Yeah.
But maybe the problem was Brian Johnson, that Jalen Hurts. When you give me the number, 8 straight offensive coordinators, different in 8 straight years. And do you know what Jalen Hurts' career arc looked like? Up. Despite the fact that they had to work with new offensive coordinator every single year, he just got better and better and better and better. What the hell happened? He took a step backwards. How do you explain that? Maybe it's Brian Johnson. Maybe he's either too close with Jalen, and Jalen doesn't know how to handle my guy is now my guy. He's calling the plays, and he and I are like this. And I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to handle it, or he's just not good at it. And he's not good at calling plays on the National Football League level. I think that's more likely than any of the other scenarios. And although I think the Eagles do have to be careful with the way they handle it, I don't think they should run in fear. If they change no one else ever ran in fear of, oh my God, we got to keep the coordinator because Jalen's our guy. I know $250 million make you more committed than anything else, but so what? He's done it 8 times. He just continued to get better and better and better. Why would you run scared of moving on from Brian Johnson?
Yeah, I don't think they'd run scared. I think they would just bring him back knowing that, that he would be their guy. If they let him go, then so be it. I mean,
you think he's merited being their guy?
No, I think you got to look at Sirianni. And like you mentioned earlier, like you don't know the inner workings. Like, Sirianni claims it's his offense, and maybe he put those restraints on Brian Johnson, and Johnson kind of resisted and kind of maybe went rogue a little bit and tried to do something differently. But yeah, clearly this offense, I mean, we saw a stretch this year of 3 straight games where this offense didn't put up more than 20 points. And this is an offense last year that averaged 28, 29 points a game. So that's clearly not good enough. And, that could be Brian Johnson. It's probably Nick Sirianni because everything trickles down. And I'm sure those two talk about the plays that are going to be called during the week in certain situations. Nick Sirianni is very big on situational type football. So I'm sure Johnson has a list of plays to choose from in various situations. And that's on Nick. If Johnson feels like his way is better, but he's not being afforded that opportunity to kind of stretch his legs a little bit, if you will, within the offense, then that's on Nick. That's not on Brian Johnson. But your point is valid. If Jalen and Brian are buddy because their families go back, years and years, is that necessarily a good thing? You want Jalen Hurts he takes to hard coaching well, so he says. Is Brian Johnson coaching Jalen Hurts well enough or hard enough to get the most out of him? That could be a concern, is that they are too close and they're too comfortable together. So maybe that's an issue. These are all things I'm sure that'll come up in the meeting with Sirianni and Lurie today sometime. But you're right. I mean, I don't think they're scared of letting go of Brian Johnson, but if they feel he's the guy to move forward, then they're going to bring him back.
Yeah. And it's all about what the Eagles feel. Yeah. And my hypothetical, which is typically Jody's wheelhouse, was on the assumption that the Eagles think Nick was the problem and there was a hamstring. And I said, if you truly think that, then show the courage of your convictions.
Fire his ass.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the larger point, though, and I want to get to this because I think Ed, I arrived in Tampa thinking, all right, Nick's going to be back, because even if they lose this game, it'll be a close game and they'll spin it, and he's a year off a Super Bowl. It won't be that big of a problem. But they laid such an egg in that game. And 2 things I point to: 13 missed tackles on defense. 0 for 11. You mentioned situational football. 0 for 11 and 0 for on 3rd and 4th downs. They even got stopped on a tush push. Should have been a penalty, but yada yada. It happens in those scrums. They even got stopped by Vita and company on the tush push. Can we just overrate the stinking personnel on this team, especially when A.J. Brown's not on the field offensively? Now, we know defensively they just stink. Offensively, without A.J., guess what? They're freaking pedestrian.
Well, and again, that's the head coach. Since he got here, he always said the offense runs through Brown, Smith, and Goddard. At no time did we see him try to develop an option behind them. He just assumed that all 3 of those guys would stay healthy, and then, when one goes out, we'll just rely on the other guys. But those other guys never saw a whole lot of time or a whole lot of targets to be developed properly. So when Brown goes out, who's your number 3 or your number 2 all of a sudden? Quez Watkins, who you didn't play for a time there when he came back. Britton Covey never got on the field. You didn't have any, Olamide Zaccheaus. I mean, he saw a little bit of time here and there, but he never got, I don't think, developed well. When you're telling other teams that offense is running through 3 players, then you're going to do your damnedest to shut those 3 players down. And then when one of those players goes out of the lineup, then you're kind of in trouble. And especially when it's someone like A.J. Brown. We saw it in the Giants last game of the year when he hurt the knee in the first quarter. They scored 1 touchdown against the Giants, 5-win team. And they scored 1 touchdown against Tampa in the playoffs. Yeah, it was a complete disaster. This team was ready for the season to end. And we saw that reflected. And is that going to hurt Sirianni when he meets with Lurie? It could. It maybe should.
I'll go hypothetical after hypothetical. I'll go right down the hypothetical road too. Let's say Sirianni keeps his job and he gives the picture for Jeff Lurie to look at. Here's how I would move going forward. And Jeff likes enough of what he hears, and whatever suggestions they're going to give him as far as coaching staff changes, he rubber stamps them. Will firing Sean Desai, Matt Patricia, throw in DK McDonald for the defensive backs, offensive side, Aaron Moorhead maybe, but you guys are convinced that the offensive coordinator staying put. Is that enough scapegoating, to use John McMullen / Jeff Lurie's favorite word? Is that enough of a scapegoat list? The 2 defense coordinators, maybe 1 defensive backfield coach, maybe 1 wide receiver coach, or does there need to be more blood on the floor? They got a pretty big tab to pay for the way they finished this season. Is just 1 coordinator and some position coaches enough to go, all right, now we got it?
Well, among the fan base, no, probably not. They want the top. They want the head chopped off at the top of this organization, and it's not going to be Howie, even though, as John mentioned, is the personnel good enough? I mean, that's certainly something to analyze. He can't escape blame here either. I mean, a report came out of Chicago. I think Clay Harbor had it that T.J. Edwards said Howie never reached out to him when he hit free agency.
Yeah.
Never tried to bring him back.
By the way, I'm glad, because everybody, and I was part of the problem with this, because I was speculating why TJ might have left. And I said, he's from Chicago. I talked to him many times over the years. He was a Bears fan growing up. I said, maybe he wanted to go home, but I saw no evidence, and I got no evidence the Eagles offered him anything. And now we know they didn't. So
and that's on Howie.
Stop saying that. Yeah,
no question. To not reach out to him and try to bring him back, a homegrown guy. So yeah, Howie cannot escape culpability here. But that that he's not going to get canned here. The only way fans will be happy, I think, most of them anyway, from judging on things I've seen on X and different social media sites, they want Sirianni gone, and that's the only thing that's going to keep them happy. But listen, there's a lot of fans out there that still support this team, obviously, and it's been a successful franchise. And you have to think about that too. If you're Jeffrey Lurie, is if you get rid of a coach who had all these accolades in the first 3 years, you run the risk of becoming the Carolina Panthers, like John said. But listen, we started by talking about Lurie. I mean, getting a late start into looking into coaches. I don't think it's a late start. Last year they played into the middle of February, so yeah, it was a late start when you had to go out. A lot of stuff was already picked over at that point. Now here we are. The divisional round of the playoffs hasn't even begun. Right, it starts tomorrow, and the Eagles are probably already formulating coordinator list. So I don't think it's late at all. I still think there's a lot of good candidates out there, but you have to find one that's going to want to come if Sirianni's back, who's going to want to hitch his potential head coaching star to Nick Sirianni and Sirianni's fate.
All right, here's the names on defense: Sean Desai, Matt Patricia, Tracy Rocker, Jeremiah Washburn, DJ Elliott, Tyler Scudder, DK McDonald, Tabor Johnson, Rennell Williams, Mike D'Angelo. Those are the Eagles' defensive coaches. Some more important than others. Interestingly enough, I think Tyler Scudder is the name to keep an eye on. He's very close to Nick Sirianni. He was his personal assistant before he got promoted to assistant linebackers coach. That's the kind of thing you see if Jeffrey tweaks. I mentioned it. Kevin Patullo's obvious because everybody knows Kevin. But Tyler Scudder's less obvious. And that's something where if Jeffrey Lurie wants to be a you-know-what, he can say, you got to move on from Tyler Scudder. And that could create the rift. It's interesting. But of all those defensive coaches, I think you could argue Tracy Rocker might be back, maybe Wash, maybe DK, and that's it. I think that's enough scapegoating for Jeffrey Lurie. And the luxury Jeffrey Lurie has, Ed, this fan base is showing up. Other cities have to worry about that because I heard Troy Aikman say that on somewhere, and he said they need to no, they don't. They can do whatever they want, and the Eagles fans are showing up. It's not like certain other cities where you have to worry about selling tickets and you got to worry about this and that. They might be angry. They might call Jody up on WIP. Correct. They might say something in the chat, but they're showing up. So Jeffrey can do whatever he wants if he wants to be consistent and continuity and calm and rational. He doesn't have to worry about it like some of the other organizations do. Agree with that or not?
Oh, absolutely. There's a long waiting list for season ticket holders, just like there is for the New York Jets. There's a fan base out there for the New York Jets too, right? I mean, even though they haven't done much since Joe Namath led them to a Super Bowl, but no, I agree with you, John. Lurie can make those decisions knowing that, hey, my fans are going to show up, and they will. They're the most popular pro sports team here in Philadelphia.
And I'll say this about Eagle fans, and while they're loud, they're emotional, sometimes they can be it's spur of the moment, but they're loyal, and they're really not dumb. They're smart. Nobody's jumping off this ship. It was either yesterday before our buddy Eitan from Philly Voice, formerly here on JAKIB, wrote a column about how Jason Kelce forewarned and how Eagle fans are going to react. And he suggested that, there's a price to be paid for this. No, there's not. Nobody's getting off the ship after 11-5 and 1 year removed from the Super Bowl. Suck for 4 straight years, then you might actually see the waiting list for tickets evaporate. Right now, it's still very deep. And if somebody's going to get so annoyed that they're bringing back Nick Sirianni, he gives up his season tickets, they'll be resold in seconds, not minutes, seconds. Somebody will jump in and buy those tickets. So Jeff Lurie does have the ability to do whatever the hell he wants here. And Philly just in general, hey, they stayed away from the Phillies for years. They went to in playoffs 5 straight years. They sucked for a decade, or at least they weren't good enough to make the playoffs. Oh, yeah, good seats available at Citizen Bank Park. But as soon as they get good again, boom, the house is packed. The Eagles have nothing to worry about the fan base. If they just turn off WIP, Jeff Lurie won't even know that they're Eagle fans that are not happy with the offseason decisions that he makes. All right, Ed Kratz, I'm going to make a prediction. We do it all the time, picking games every single week. We've been doing it for months now. We believe the head coach is staying. That could, as we continue to spin through hypothetical scenarios, could change by this afternoon. But if Sirianni is here, they changing 1 or 2 coordinators. And if it's only one, who do you think is going to be the next person in that chair when all the spinning of the chairs ends?
I think Frank Reich will have a role on this team next year in some form, whether it's as the OC or a senior offensive analyst. But I think Frank Reich will be on this staff.
Why didn't Frank come back this year?
Well, I think things were kind of already in place with the Eagles. Although, having said that, Sirianni was quick to move on from Patricia or Desai and bring in Patricia. And by the way, that was a huge problem. Talking to players on Wednesday,
it's the biggest mistake.
It was a huge mistake. Defensive players all said it was a tough adjustment to make. That was a bad thing to do. And if that was all Sirianni, he's got to answer to that too. But as far as your question goes, I think Frank Reich will have a role. I think, that Brian Johnson question is pretty tricky. I'm going to say he's going to be back just for the sake of, kind of playing the other side of this, because everybody thinks he's gone. But I think somehow Brian Johnson's going to come back, and they're going to end up replacing some of these other assistants that John mentioned. Jeff Stoutland has to answer for some things too. I know he gets a big pass, but this offensive line, and he's the run game coordinator. They couldn't block in the run game for weeks and weeks and weeks after getting off to such a good start. They had a hard time picking up blitz protections. Now I know there's more than just your offensive line in play here, but Stoutland gets a pass, and He is a great coach, but he's got to answer to some things. This offensive line did not block well in the run game late, and that's a problem.
All right.
So, yeah, I think a lot of these assistants are in trouble, but I think Johnson comes back, Sirianni comes back, and they'll probably bring in Frank Reich. Defensive side of the ball, I have no idea, but it's going to be somebody new.
All right, send your hate mail to @Kratzy. Jeff Stoutland disrespect. I love it. SI.com/NFL/Eagles. Edge scoops Kratz, breaking the news that Jeffrey Lurie's yacht shopping. Hopefully he's back. Maybe the weather cut him down. So we'll see what happens today, how it unfolds. But Ed's doing a great job at SI.com. I'm doing an okay job, but he's doing a great job. So well done, Ed.
Yeah. No, don't sell yourself short, John.
Except John couldn't find St. Martin on a map. You needed to. You did, and I give you credit for it.
I knew it was in the Caribbean.
Okay.
I knew that.
Thanks, guys. Be safe.
Eddie K.
Thanks,
It's Ed Kratz from Sports Illustrated here with us on Birds 365. Got another good Eagle beat writer, hopefully joining us in less than 20 minutes now. Did Brooks tell you why yesterday? Did he just forget his phone go dead?
He was caught up in something. Sometimes as that's the term he used. Sometimes as a beat writer, you're ordered to do a story, and there's sometimes you can't do it. Happened to Jeff Kerr the one time, you remember. Sometimes you get ordered by
but
higher ups and say.
To Kerr's credit, he did text and say,
"Yeah,
I caught up in."
Well, that would have been nice. Yeah, that part would have been nice.
Brooks kind of fumbled the football on that one, but we're giving him another shot. Sometimes you cough it up, you got to hand it right back to him and go, "All right, prove that was just an anomaly." So Brooks Cabina from The Athletic is scheduled to join us coming up in less than 20 minutes here on Birds 365. Hey, guys, Birds fans, here's your chance to save up to 40% on your car insurance right now from one of JAKIB Sports' great partners. Here's what you need to do. Call managing partners Jim and or Fran and tell them you're a friend of JAKIB Sports and Birds 365.
My name is Fran Salerno. I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.
Any professional sports coach will tell you there's no substitution for preparation. At Malamut & Associates, that is a tenet by which we live. We prepare from day one for victory. Anything less is not acceptable.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia Dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, Then do what you usually do on a Sunday. Watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
EAGLES, Eagles.
I get Mac and Mac here on Birds 365. Like I said, we're hoping that Brooks Cabina does not get something to work on in the next 15 minutes, and he's able to join us here on Birds 365, he of The Athletic. Johnny Mac,
Nick will probably get fired in 10 minutes from now. No,
you think so? That would change.
I do not think so. Yeah,
that would change.
That
everything.
would change everything.
Yeah, we cut anybody slack if that's the case. We don't know if Jeffrey ever got off the island of San Martin, St. Martin, or whatever the hell it's called. John, the Eagles did make some moves yesterday. Major moves within the last since the season ended. The reserve futures contract market, which is, it's not exactly the same, but it's pretty similar for those who don't understand. And for years, that included yours truly. Kind of like yesterday as well, the Phillies named the 15 players that are getting non-roster invites to the minor league, preseason spring camp, that you're in camp, you get a uniform, you get to play in a couple of spring games. Your chances of making the team are probably not great. There are even levels to that. Guys who are young and are draft picks that they just want to give them a taste, that they're bringing them into camp. You know, they got next to no shot of making the team. Then you got guys who are signed to those type deals. Either you're going to make the team or they're going to release you. So they're even different levels, but it's kind of the same thing. You got a shot. That's all they're promising you is a shot. You're going to get to show up and show out at some point, but you're down the priority list. They had 20 guys that they signed to reserve future contracts. If you could educate me and our listeners in any way, shape, or form, what reserve future contracts actually are, what they look like, how much emphasis should be put on them, what do you think about the 20 guys? And I could give you some of the names, but if you'd be so kind, first educate us a little bit on what reserve future contracts are.
Well, mainly it's for the practice squad guys, and then the Eagles tend to be a little bit more, a little bit more forward thinking, trying to get guys under contract than typical NFL teams, which I think is good. But the vast majority of the guys were practice squad guys, and the Eagles brought in a few others. And basically, it's you know, you're going into off-season mode from the salary cap standpoint. So when the new league year starts, the top 51 is basically the rule when it comes to the salary cap. And reserve future signings never account for any of that. So basically, it's just a procedural thing. And it generally, most teams sign most of their practice squad guys. Some of the guys want to take a look around. The Eagles are usually, most teams get about 9-10 guys. The Eagles, as you mentioned, brought back 20, many of them from the practice squad that ended the season, but handful of other guys as well. Yeah, it's something to keep an eye on from a developmental standpoint, but it's not earth-shattering or anything of that nature.
Right. Now, I said we got a couple names here that I note, like Turin Jackson. He's a 5th-round draft pick, and he is now on the reserve futures level of acknowledgement and or commitment from the organization. That's not good.
That's because he was on the practice squad. So Basically, if you're on the practice squad, you're if you end the season on the practice squad, your contract expires. So you have to sign, if you want somebody back, you have to sign him to a reserve futures deal. In the case of Tehran, he was a 6th-round pick, but yeah, he had long ago been cut and brought back on the practice squad. So any of those guys. So if you see the season, you end. I'll pull up their practice squad. This was the group on the practice squad when the season ended. Thomas Booker, they signed to a reserve deal. LaRaven Clark, they signed. Noah Ellis, they signed. Mekhi Gardner, Mario Goodrich, Griffin Bear. I think Griffin was on the list, but I'm not sure. Taron Jackson, Tristan McCullum was on the list. Joseph Nada, Lou Nichols, Josiah Scott, Brandon Smith, Lasitis Smith, Noah Tungi.
I don't think Josiah Scott was on
No,
the
he wasn't.
future list.
Brett Todd. I'm just giving you all the names on the Eagles practice squad. And Greg Ward wasn't. Some of the veterans, because remember when they expanded the practice squad, let you put veterans. So some of the veterans take some time to shop around. Generally, the younger players that you have on the practice squad, you bring back on reserve futures deals. Not everybody, some.
Is there a max number? Like you said, most teams are somewhere in the 10 to 12 area. Eagles inked 20 guys to this yesterday. Is there a max number, or could you have 50 under future reserve?
You could have, but remember, there's a max number for the offseason roster, so you can only have 90 guys. So that you can do it any way you want to get to that. And most people don't even get to 90 till after the draft and after undrafted free agency.
Right.
After the draft, that's when they hit that number. So at this time of year, it's not a problem. You have a certain number of guys under contract, and you can't go above. You can never go above 90, but that's not an issue this time of year. But the Eagles are, and by the way, I give them credit for stuff like that. They'll take a shot, and most times it won't matter, to be honest. But occasionally you might find a player here or there. And it's easier to find a player if you actually have them in the building. So, or have them, So I think they do things like that. We always say winning outside the margins. They take pride in that. They take it more seriously, and I think that's a good thing. Like Jacob Harris, I'm looking down the list. He wasn't here. He not only, and he's. He was a 4th-round pick at one point, but he was not here at any point during the season. And they signed him to a reserve futures deal. So maybe they saw something in him. And who knows, maybe it develops down the road, but I think they do things like that better than most teams. So that kind of stuff I give them credit for.
As do I. But I want to ask you about one specific position. And they drafted Devontae Smith in the 1st round, moved up, moved back, then moved back up again to be able to be in position to draft him. And yeah, they could have taken that linebacker from Penn State that's gone to Dallas and done pretty well. I don't want to re-legislate that draft again. All we know is Devontae Smith was about the only player for the Eagles that could walk off the field with his head held high on Monday night. He's lived up to every reputation that he's needed to and done exactly what the Eagles should have expected from him. Howie Roseman made a great trade and got a steal for A.J. Brown. And A.J. Brown, as you and I think both agreed at the end of this season, was probably the best football player on the Philadelphia Eagles roster all year. Numero uno, above Lane Johnson, above Jason Kelce, above anyone else on the offense or the defense. He's probably their best football player this year. And how he went out and got him and didn't have to overpay. They paid him a lot of money for his salary, but that was even going rate for the NFL for a star of his magnitude. So the top 2 wide receiver spots, outstanding, Howie. As good as any other general manager in the NFL. All your other wide receivers, not good. Quez, not good. Alameda made a couple of nice catches over the course of the year. Look at the numbers. They're not all that impressive, not jumping off the page at all. And your practice squad guys, and Julio shot in the dark, he just looks done and over. Your practice squad guys showed no ability. We never did. Anytime we have a conversation, John and Mike, well, they could call this wide receiver up from the practice squad. Nope. Those guys didn't show anything that said, yeah, why don't you call me up from the practice squad? How big a problem is that with the organization, that their ability to judge non-superstar wide receivers was awful this year?
Well, I think it's been, to be honest, I think it's been awful for quite a few years. If you think about A.J. Brown and pre-Devontae Smith, I mean, this team, Carson Wentz set the franchise record for passing yards with a receiver no receiver that had over 600 yards. Now, they had Zach Ertz at tight end, but it's kind of amazing how in this era of professional football, they went so long without having a top-tier receiver, and they made the mistake on Jalen Reagor, picking him over Justin Jefferson. And to fix that mistake, they had to go back in the draft and get Devontae Smith, and they had to trade up, by the way, to get him.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had to trade another first-round pick the next year, plus a third-round pick, plus $100 million to get A.J. Brown to fix this position. And they still have no depth because they haven't been able to develop anybody over the state. And Quez Watkins could, you know what, he as a 6th-round pick, when you judge it from that perspective, he had some decent games, but he got progressively worse in the Nick Sirianni era. So, yeah, it's been a stain, their lack of development of 3rd, 4th, 5th receivers. When you look around teams like Green Bay, you're going to see them play this weekend. They got all those young receivers. They're throwing them out there. They're making plays.
5 deep.
Eagles can't find anybody. It's astonishing.
So is that on Howie? Because you mentioned you go back to the previous regime, Doug Peterson, now into Nick Sirianni. So it's been going on for many a year now. Is that on Howie and his?
Yeah, you got to look at it now. You can see we were just talking about the reserve future guys. Jacob Harris was somebody I brought up. Griffin Hebert, who played wide receiver at Louisiana, played tight end. Big wide receiver essentially. They brought him in late in the season. Jacob Harris, who hadn't been here. Shaquan Davis, who hadn't been here. So they're trying to find bodies at the position, and they need Austin Watkins as well, who hadn't been here. So they're trying to find bodies at the position. You can see it already. And they need to get more athletic, and they need somebody when they're forced to play, like when A.J. Brown gets hurt.
Yeah.
Make a play. They need to find some bodies, and clearly they're already trying to do it with the reserve signings that they did.
And none of those names jump off the page to me, but I'm not going to put myself on it. Oh, I know exactly. No, I don't know. But these guys, they might have found a diamond in the rough yesterday, or they could have just accumulated more roughage, which is all their wide receivers have been, not named Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown the last couple of years. All right, he's McMullen on McDonald. I see the Brooks cabine is good enough to go today. I think he was out shoveling yesterday. I think that's what he's actually working on.
It wasn't snowing yesterday.
Well, but the ice, you had to get the ice up. So when the snow came today, you didn't go ass over tea kettle down on the ice. So I think Brooks was actually out salting yesterday. But he's with us today. We can see him in the green room. He's ready to rock and roll with us. Brooks Corbina from The Athletic up next here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
For the big story on Action News,
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
You got your Mag and Mac guys, McMullen and McDonald here on Birds 365, and we are joined by Brooke Cabina from The Athletic, who I was lucky enough to be able to talk to on Sunday prior to the game when he was on with my other Mac partner, Glenn Mack, now on WIP. And none of us were really overly optimistic coming into the game against the Bucs on Sunday. You might maybe a little less pessimistic than me or Mac now. It was a spit show, if you get my drift. What the hell happened? What was it? We always talk about the perfect storm coming together. I don't know that there could be any less perfect storm that came together Monday night in Tampa. What to you was the biggest thing that just stuck out and you go, oh my God, they stink?
They couldn't tackle. I mean, the team forgot how to tackle. You have people just running right over the middle and then running right through defenders. No one's going to win when you do that. I mean, the second thing that stuck out to me was that the Eagles were only down 16-9 at halftime, and they had 3 shots coming out of the second half. 1, 2, 3, and then safety. Game's pretty much over at that point because there wasn't much confidence that the offense was going to score another touchdown, much less 2. So it was a team that looked disorganized, that looked like it wasn't confident, and that was doing a lot of confusing things, like starting off the game with 2 major runs that end up being first downs, and then 3rd and 2, they're forcing a downfield throw, and then the next drive on 3rd and 3 doing the same. Not a lot made sense in that game, and it never seemed like for a moment that the Eagles were supposed to have been favored. I wrote a week before that at one point it was unquestionable that the Eagles were bound for the playoffs. Now it's questionable if they belong at all. They didn't look like they belonged. So that was what was striking to me, that all of the talk leading into that, from Sirianni to Jalen Hurts to everyone on the team, saying that the playoffs was going to be different and that they would finally find their way through, didn't show up. So they didn't have the answers. This was a very talented roster. The frustrations were evident across the board, but they just simply didn't have the answers.
Yeah. You bring up 13 missed tackles officially, Brooks. So I look at that and, Tampa Bay was trying to keep them in the game. If you think about all their drop passes in the first half, if they caught the football, the game would have been over in a quicker fashion.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I looked at was 0 for 11 combined on third and fourth downs. You mentioned some of the third downs of trying to get the football down the field in manageable situations. That's been a problem all season. They seem to have fallen in love with the explosive play and, sometimes, go get the first down and get the explosive play on the next set of downs. Great personnel, though. And I raised my hand, Brooks, because I thought they had great personnel. I'm starting to waver. I think many of us overrated this team, certainly defensively, but even offensively from the perspective of no A.J. Brown, and this team looks completely different. I mean, it looks completely pedestrian when A.J. Brown wasn't on the field. Very short time. He got hurt in the first quarter against the Giants and then the playoffs. When he's not out there, the whole thing falls apart. Did we overrate the roster of this team?
No, I don't think so, because, I know this is coming from a perspective of a different team, but, whenever I was covering the Texans early on in the year, going into the year, I was like, well, they don't really have any wide receivers. And the depth of what they had was like Robert Woods and Xavier Hutchinson and Brevin Jordan, all these players, and they found ways to get them open and scheme them up to be able to get catches. So, you make use of what you have on your roster. I was listening to you guys earlier, with Quez Watkins and, others on the receiving core. Targeting them, finding them in spaces, giving them the opportunity to even get the ball. We weren't seeing that. We were seeing Jalen Hurts forcing the ball to Devontae Smith in places where it was obvious that if they were going to go to somebody, that was going to be the guy. They took all the questioning out of it for a defense. The one thing you don't want to be on offense is predictable. So on 4th and 4, when in this crucial point of the game, I talked to Devontae Smith after the game. He said he went up to Sirianni and said, "Give me the ball." Everybody in the stadium knew if they were going to go to one guy, it was going to be Devontae Smith. So if they're going to go in man-on-man situation and out in the end zone, it was well covered. They should have expected it. For him to have scored would have been totally a problem for the Buccaneers, because they would have to face the question, did you not think they were going to go to Devontae Smith there? So, I don't think whenever you have Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, and DeAndre Swift and an offensive line that has 3 Pro Bowlers on it, that's a good roster in terms of the rest of the NFL. So that they had the lack of answers with what they had, they should have been a lot more competitive offensively than they were.
Brooks, I want to ask you about talking to the players after the game and then with the exit interview the other day. Immediately after the game, at least the whispers around the locker room, which became reports thereafter, that Jason Kelce was telling some of his teammates, "Listen, guys, don't know that I'm going to be back in the room. This could very well be it." Became a major conversation because of what Jason Kelce has been here during his time in Philadelphia. And I'm not suggesting it shouldn't have been the major topic of conversation, but it did just kind of take the focus away a little bit. Then on Wednesday, when all you guys get in there and the players walking out, the question was about Sirianni and his status. Starting with Jason after the game. What are you talking about? Like trying to be flippant that I don't even know why we're having this conversation. And Fletcher going on deep defense of Nick Sirianni. So there have been issues that have been talked about. Are the players looking enough in the mirror and going, yeah, maybe the coaching wasn't as good as it was supposed to be, but 11 missed tackles, did you say, John, or 13?
13
missed tackles. Yeah, part of that could have been because the coaches didn't have you in the optimum spot. A whole bunch of it with my eyes were, you guys didn't play hard enough. You guys didn't try hard enough. You guys weren't successful enough to just put yourself into a position to make a tackle. Are the players getting less criticism than maybe they should because of Jason walking away and coaching decisions to be made?
No, I think there's just a lot of attention on Nick Sirianni right now because of the collapse. Who is ultimately responsible? Head coach. So that's where a lot of the direction of the questioning and where things are going right now. mean, I talked to several players, Jordan Mailata, Nicholas Morrow, guys that were very open about how they personally and as a team struggled as players. I mean, A.J. Brown talked about it a couple of weeks ago at his locker. I mean, it's not lost out on them that their problem was as big as the coach's problem. I mean, Jalen Hurts said it as his locker on Wednesday too, that, he included himself in the self-accountability. So I think when you look at the major problem and trying to explain why the team went from 10-1 to 11-7 down the stretch, I mean, that's a huge nosedive with a lot of questions and trying to figure out how to make it help work. But Nick Sirianni is going to take the major brunt of that. That's expected. So, and the other point I'd like to make is, like, if you go up to a player and say, "What do you think of your coach?" It's kind of a question where I'm not really expecting him to say anything other than, "Hey, I really like the guy."
Yeah, he's
so
terrible.
Like, I don't really expect any other answer. So I'm not saying that they don't feel that way or do feel that way, but I don't think you're really going to get the most honest answer in that kind of situation. But that's just my opinion. I don't think there are different ways to support verbally your coach and give your take on it, but I just psychologically and how people work, I don't think that's really
But
a situation.
I will say this: Darius Slay, who's as straight a shooter as you're going to get on that team, did kind of suggest that the whole flopping out to Cy for Patricia was a failure.
Yeah, after a decision had already been
wives
made.
Comparison. How do you deal with two wives? It's not a good thing. So he did call out the organization, and you can direct it any way you want toward Sirianni because he says it was his decision, and or if you believe he was pushed into making the decision. I'll give Slay credit. He did at least give you an honest answer that, the firing of the defense coordinator was stupid.
But again, that's a decision that had already been made, framed around a defensive coordinator shift that had already happened. Like,
okay,
so
they'll tell you the truth after the fact, but they won't tell you in advance, is what you're saying.
I mean, they're players who have contracts and influences on this. They have their futures. So if they're accountable to what their problems are too, they're going to throw themselves under the bus too. Like, what if there are some things that aren't really smart to do. So it's.
Well, I say it all the time. People listen to coaches in press conference, Brooks, and they act like they're under oath. I mean, they lie to us all the time. Nick Sirianni lies, but people say, "Oh, he said this on Monday." Yeah, he might have been blowing smoke up here.
Sirianni said, on a Monday that he wasn't going to change play callers, the defensive play callers, and then 2 days later, Matt Patricia is leading the defensive meetings. So
exactly. So. You're 100% right on that. But I want to, let's talk about Nick Sirianni because that's the story, obviously. And scheduled meeting today with Jeffrey Lurie. So we know Jeffrey's history here in Philadelphia, and we know the 6 out of 7. It looked really bad at the end, the optics. Now, to me, you have a very unique viewpoint of this because you were in Houston, and if you think about Houston in the wake of Bill O'Brien, I think it was, what did they go, 3 straight years? I think it was Romeo, David Culley, Lovie Smith, and then they finally seem to have gotten it right with D'Amico Ryans. But there were some lean times in Houston, and they didn't have the greatest reputation because they're hiring guys to fire them in 1 year. Where do you kind of fall on continuity versus this guy's got a 667 winning percentage, 3 consecutive playoff appearances, but it looked really bad. You want to be rash, you want to reboot, or you believe in continuity?
So, we could go for an hour about the coaching changes over the last 3 years with the Texans. There are a lot of stories to that. But specific to this situation, the difference here is you look at a Texans organization that was constantly rebuilding and drafting new players and bringing in young free agents and working with the cap situation that was absolutely garbage and that needed to be overhauled. So whenever the coaches were in those situations, And coming out of Bill O'Brien's firing, Romeo Crennel was the interim for that year, and then they started opening up. And then Deshaun Watson issued a trade demand and then was hit with all of his civil lawsuits. Nobody was really going to, at the trade demand, nobody really wanted to come into that situation. So the job pool was pretty slim. And David Culley became the head coach, first time as an NFL head coach. After that, the roster was still in shambles after that first year. And the reason, partly why David Culley was fired, was because the players that they were drafting and putting in these situations were not being developed. You think about the offense and whether it's fitting, the defense, whether it's fitting, is everything that's being put into this organization, is that working? So that's the point that I'd make through this. Right now, Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman making calls all week, looking for coaches available to present and a potential staff to Jeffrey Lurie. So the main question here is, you've got two scenarios that are probably going to happen. Right now, offensive coordinator Brian Johnson's out interviewing for head coaching positions. So let's just say you're going to either, one, start over entirely by firing Nick Sirianni and hiring a new head coach to build out a staff, or you believe in Nick Sirianni and he's going to pretty much have the same effect from there on down in the coaching staff that would happen with an entire overhaul anyway. New coordinators, likely a lot of new staff members below that. So do they believe that Sirianni, does Jeffrey Lurie believe that Sirianni is the one that will be able to lead a coaching staff into new answers, or are those people that are coming in going to be the ones that can solve the answers for why they went from 10-1 to 11-7, why the offense that had all these players couldn't find a way to get downfield and score, why A.J. Brown wasn't able to be involved in the games he was, why Jalen Hurts couldn't handle the blitz, why the defense, couldn't tackle and couldn't be in space. Those guys will be part of that, and Lurie would have to have confidence that A, Sirianni can find those people, and B, organize the team and all of the things that go off the field in terms of organization, although that would be part of the same flow with the players that they have. So that's the major question. So right now, this is totally different from what the Texans had the last 3 years. You have a team that had high expectations, the roster that's prepared. You're looking to see, is this something that teams have seen what you're going to do. Jalen Hurts and this offense, and they found answers against you. Now you're trying to figure out whether you have the guys that are going to be able to respond. Totally different situation. So it's what the Texans next year are going to have to deal with when everybody says, well, we looked at this 1 year at C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins and all these people and Bobby Sloak with all of his offense. They're going to find answers for it, and they're going to come next year. And if they struggle, then that's what the Eagles situation would be in right now. So those are the differences.
All right. John and I discussed it in the first segment today and yesterday. And Ed Kratz, when he jumped in with us, we discussed it with him. And we all seem to be pretty much on the same side. If there's a change at head coach late today, tomorrow, whatever, next couple of days, it'll be because Nick Sirianni got himself fired, that he drew a line in the sand, that he refused to walk back, and that Jeff Lloyd decided to pull the plug on him. I think he's smart enough to realize that and won't do that. But the reason I can't say 100% is because, A, I think he can be real stubborn. And from time to time, he lets his emotions get the better of him. Give me a percentage chance that Nick either takes a stance or reacts to something that he's told or is asked to react to, where he just gets crazy and pointing fingers and screaming and yelling at fans and going into tunnels and screaming at the. Is there any chance Nick Sirianni shoots himself in the foot this afternoon?
I would be thinking about what he would be taking his stand on. Because when you sit down and you're in that meeting,
I'll give you a name, Kevin Patullo. If the word comes down today, listen, we got the coaching staff list here, and we're just scratching off names, and one of them's Kevin Patullo, his good buddy, his trusted number one ear. If they say, listen, we're wiping all this clean, and you got to be okay with it, Nick. Would Nick go to war for him?
they're making several calls throughout this week, organizing potential staffs so that they can look through and see which is going to make this happen. So it's not just one name. So that already is not, I don't think, the case. So I think in the certain situations where he'd be maybe inflexible is not the right word, because the thing I keep thinking about in terms of what he really, really believes in and is not really, he's always said, like, this is my offense. This is what we're running through. But even then, I think he's savvy enough to know that they didn't have the right answers for the blitz. They didn't have the right answers for how things work, getting the ball downfield to their best receivers, how some of that didn't work. So it's his rhetoric throughout all these games has been, we're a solutions-based team. We're not pointing fingers. And the fact that he on defense I mean, I think he maybe was a little too soon in shifting from Sean Desai to Matt Patricia. Basically, that proved out by the defense not doing any better, but that showed that he was willing to change even at a time when he wasn't really supposed to. I mean, I think he's pretty aware of how he ended up getting the job with the Eagles, where Doug Peterson goes in and is obstinate and doesn't want to really change beyond what he thinks should happen, and it was already bucking with personnel, and was very loyal to his coaching staff. I think Sirianni knows a little bit how to read the room in that type of way. Okay. So I would be surprised if that was the case, if he ended up dying on a hill.
Fair point. You mentioned blitz a couple times, and that was the biggest problem, I think, offensively. People, and Jason Kelce even said it on cleanout day, whether Jason Kelce's back or not, it's unlikely he's coming back. Jalen Hurts is going to see a lot of zero blitz until he proves he can handle it, and this coaching staff can help him handle it. How much of the issues lean on the quarterback in those types of situations? I mean, think about the term sight adjustment, Brooks. It's in the offense. I've seen it. But that's a receiver and a quarterback being on the same page. There's an unblocked. That's on the quarterback. Dating back to Frank Reich, Eagles fans love, and Shane Steichen. An unaccounted for blitzer is essentially, that's on the quarterback. Everybody's got their responsibility to pick up. If you have an extra guy coming, ball's got to come out. How much do you blame that on Jalen Hurts?
I mean, he's definitely a huge part of it. You have certain situations where the coach is supposed to give you an answer, and then there's the player who's supposed to recognize it and then respond with the right answer. And I mean, even with the safety, that's a 4-man rush, and he ends up taking a safety after getting flagged for intentional grounding. There was a lot of times, I'm thinking back to even, I believe it was the Cowboys game, correct me if I'm wrong, where they were driving into the end zone, into the red zone, and then he backed up and then slipped and fell. And then that turned into a field goal that was not helpful in the game. There were times where he was running himself into pressure. There was time he was running away from answers that were on the field. A lot of the times he pulls off towards the sideline and the receiver that looks to be the hot route is on the other side of the field. It becomes part of a larger conversation too about the responsibility Jalen Hurts had throughout the year that Brian Johnson, Nick Sirianni were trying to do, and giving him more power at the line. He walked up to the line of scrimmage with a list of checks that he could go to in a play. Some offenses, you only get one under certain coaches. He had a list. And there were times where I feel like there was clear miscommunication for what they were doing. We got an insight on that against Tampa Bay on Monday night, where the 3rd and 3, he gives one check that looked like this, and then right at the end, he did a little quick this, and nobody was looking. Devontae Smith said that later. Him and Dallas Goedert saw the first sign, didn't see the second, and now they're running pretty much the same route, making things a problem. That's on Jalen. That's on the players too. Are they supposed to be looking the whole time? Is Jalen supposed to be more demonstrative? I mean, it is on the players in those senses. Whenever you're given the power to dictate what can happen on the line, you got to make sure that communication is being heard. So if that stems over, because we don't have examples, it's great when players tell you what's going on, because then you can understand a bit. I haven't talked to any. I went through the locker room the other day and tried to understand a little bit about the blitzes and whether there's some specific examples to look to. Talking to a couple of offensive linemen, and all these players are accepting the blame as a whole. They're like, well, look, you can look at the field and you see that the defense has one free player. Sometimes it comes from anywhere. And they can have one player from the box go take off and then cover somebody else on the other side of the field. So all of the conversation I had basically pointed to, it's been difficult for the offense to diagnose who people are sending, given the offense that they're running. So the checks, all that stuff, it hasn't really worked in terms of giving Hurts the ability to check through those things. So that's things that they really need the 30-foot view for, to reassess whether that system even functions well and how they can fix that to allow Hurts to have the right way to check the things, to see things the right way, and to not end up in situations where they have no answers. So, it's definitely, there's definitely a lot of the weight of that issue on Jalen and the players, for sure.
Since you made reference earlier to the Texan situation and the positions they were in and salary cap hell because of Deshaun Watson and the deal they were going to have to make to get him off the roster, I know you get the whole roster construction thing. One of the most intriguing guys this offseason to me is, because the Eagles got a whole bunch of free agents. Whole guys just after they finish the game in Tampa, oops, guess what? You're not an Eagle anymore. You're a free agent. Are you coming back? You're going elsewhere, whatever. Well, one guy they have under contract going forward that I have no bloody idea what you can expect from him, or if they just have to move on. James Bradbury signed a 3-year contract during this past offseason. You can move on from a guy anytime you want, but there are ramifications and salary cap hits. And his would be in excess of $17 million, which is a lot less than you'd be paying him just to have him back. But because you spread money out and you went 3 years deep, that's a pretty good hit for a guy who you kept all of 1 year and he stunk. What do you think they're going to do with James Bradbury? Did they swallow the pill and go, yeah, he just fell off the face of the earth as far as talent and skill, and not believe that it was a coaching issue, that he just got real old real fast? What do you think they're going to do with James Bradbury this offseason?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, when it comes to dead money, he'd end up being a major hit, costing the team close to $10 million in terms of cap savings. The only way that doesn't change, according to Over the Cap, is if he's traded post June 1st, and that would give them alleviation on the salary cap. Also, according to this, after June 1st, if he's cut, his dead money goes down to $4 million, and then he'd be pretty much a nominal cap savings. So they have some leeway a little bit with his contract, and according to Over the Cap, which is generally accurate on these things.
Mm-hmm.
So keeping him through training camp and then making a decision through there, they'd have a lot more financial flexibility in deciding where they want to keep him or not. So going into the offseason, I would expect that they look at that position really hard. And you've got players like Keely Ringo, who came in and played a lot and at times struggled, at times looked like he excelled. And they decide whether they need to add more to that group. I think they do, throughout all the problems they had at the slot beyond Devontae Maddox. You got to decide what you're going to do. Bradley Roby, his contract is expiring. Was he just a mercenary for this year? You'd have to probably replace that roster spot. So they pull together and figure out how to bolster up that defensive back core and then move into training camp, knowing that whatever they have behind that, if they decide to move on from Bradbury, whoever they have is going to be good enough to replace him. So is that building around Ringo? Is that building around whatever? That's definitely something they will do, in my opinion. So as bleak as his contract is currently, there appears to be more flexibility in the future.
At B Cabina, follow Brooks on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Athletic.com does a tremendous job covering the Philadelphia Eagles. your first clean out day in Philadelphia, Brooks. The most interesting part to me was Fletcher Cox for two reasons. One, Fletcher empties the locker, said he needed to clean it. That's not typical way of doing business. You see some of those guys, those mercenaries. Shaq Leonard, it wasn't even a speck of dust to tell you he was there. It got Nick Morrow out quickly. Marcus Mariota, bang, everything gone. Fletcher, that's weird. And then to add to that, Jordan Davis was talking about him like he was gone. What in the past tense, and he and Jalen Carter have to step up. They're not going to have Fletcher Cox as the security blanket. Is that just a young player just making speculation? Is it wild? Do you think there was more to it?
Yeah, I think. Well, for one, Dave Zangaro, he asked him to clarify whether they actually talked to him or not about their decision, Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, and he admitted that they did not. So it's partly a young guy reading the tea leaves, and that's not to say, like, whenever older veterans come up and start talking to you, and there's a sense of what they're saying, and they're saying, "Hey, this is in your hands," like whatever, all these kinds of different ways, and those aren't specific quotes, but I'm gathering that they've been talking to him in the way that the defensive staff have wanted them to take these young draft picks, these young first-round picks, and teach them up, to give them the leadership that you've had, and give them the lessons. That's a thing that Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox both have done. So, this situation, I think, definitely from Jordan Davis' perspective, he's just a young guy reading the tea leaves. I don't think he has the direct knowledge of that. But at the same time, you look at Cox and Graham, and their contracts are up. You look at the performance and where the defense is going. They're really going to have to figure out what fit everybody fits into whenever they ultimately figure out what defensive coach is going to lead this team. I think Fletcher Cox still has, I think it'd be up. I think the Eagles would allow Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, for as much as they've done with the team, to decide whether they'd be able to make a case to come back. So I think there were a lot of times where Fletcher played really well. So I think he'd be a fit elsewhere. So it's really, to me, it would be a question of whether Cox wants to come back. So those are things that whenever you talk to him in his locker, him saying, "I haven't really made a decision yet." I think that's more the lines of where that is. So Brandon Graham made clear after the game Sunday that he wants to come back for homecoming. He's played throughout the year, just coming in halfway through, seeing that the Eagles and their pass rush wasn't what it was the last year. That would be just a large conversation for the Eagles to say, is the roster spot from Brandon Graham going into this, is he going to be effective in whatever scheme they end up running? So hopefully it's not Matt Patricia or some other kind of coach that's bringing edge rushers back in coverage like they were doing with Brandon Graham so much. So we'll see.
No, I think we're 99.9% sure it's not going to be Matt Patricia running the defense next year. All right, Brooks, last thing. Where'd you get the jacket / sweater or whatever it is that you got? Looking a little Texas-y, but I think it's going to work in Philadelphia. Where'd you get that?
It was a gift. It's just a cardigan. It was a thoughtful thing from someone I know, because they're like, well, it's a little colder out there. So I'm actually kind of coming down with a little bit of a cold myself.
You're probably too close to Martin.
Well, my car was covered in snow yesterday, like ice, everything. I had to take out and pretty much, I should have tried to get Cam Jurgens flamethrower over there to knock that out. So definitely new around here.
You got the cardigan on. You're looking good. I don't know if it's going to actually save you from getting a cold, but you look good, my friend. And we appreciate you jumping in with us today. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you plenty during the off season. Thanks for joining us today.
Of course. See you guys.
Brooks
Thanks,
Cabina
Mike.
from The Athletic. If you don't subscribe to The Athletic, you might think about it because he does an outstanding job covering the Birds. And he jumped in mid-season and he hit the ground running. Did a really nice job this year. Did a good job with us today. All right, McMullen and McDonald coming back. We got to put a bow on the show, a bow on the weekend, and we'll just give you a little shot in the dark as to what's going to happen with the Eagles this upcoming next couple of days. A little speculation to go out the door here on Birds 365.
Any professional sports coach will tell you there's no substitution for preparation. At McMullen Associates, that is a tenet by which we live. We prepare from day one for victory. Anything less is not acceptable.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia Dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday. Watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
EAGLES, Eagles.
All right, we're close to dripping over into the power hour, and we want to let Calarulo get going on time. Johnny Mac, we got 2 days off here on Birds 365, a.k.a. the weekend. So you can listen to me on CBS Sports Radio. John will be working his phone, taking texts all weekend long. Will they be where the Eagles go from here, as in Nick Sirianni in conjunction with Howie Roseman and Jeff Lurie rebuilding a much changed staff? Or is it going to be the clean slate and Sirianni does something that gets himself fired today? Give me the percentage breakdown of it happening in McMullen land.
I'm at 92% that Nick Sirianni will be back, and there will be significant changes on the coaching staff. No question about that. But there's always, I leave that little door open. The difference, as I mentioned, between Peterson and Sirianni, Peterson was further along because of the Mike Rose stuff. We haven't had that with Nick. And, we'll see how the Eagles go. Defensively, I think, is the bigger issue. And they need to correct things offensively. But I think people forget They were still a top 10 offense in most meaningful categories. They need adjustments. They certainly need to handle the blitz better. I think that can be accomplished defensively. They got a whole foundational rebuild. I think they got to change scheme, philosophy. I think they got to get ahead of the curve instead of following the curve. And that decision there will be the most important and most interesting.
I agree wholeheartedly on all fronts there. The defense is more interesting than the offense for me, but we'll see how it shakes out. All right, partner, good job this week. You missed a couple shows. I missed the show. I thought we did good the last 2 days here with Mac and Mac returning. I'm planning on being here all 5 days next week. How about you?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Let's
see.
plan.
Let's hopefully we don't get snowed in. Everybody be safe today.
Neither McMullen or McDonald going to San Martin. We plan on being here all week, next week, here on Birds 365 with plenty to talk about. Be with us.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.